as bold as lions. As bold as lions.
As bold as lions.
As bold as lions.
You're listening to the As Bold as Lions podcast.
Hello. It is the As Bold as Lions podcast, and good to have you on board today as we embark on another week, another episode of the book of Esther. And I've enjoyed going through these messages with you, unpacking this book, and I hope you have as well. On the outset, I said this is a journey and a little bit of a commitment if you really want to come along and see this thing from start to finish. And so it's been a little while since I've done a series like this, but it's been eye-opening for myself. It's been enlightening. God's shown me a lot through Esther and just her story and all of these characters in the book. And so we just have 2 weeks left, this week and next week. My plan is to put everything up. The hosting site that I use has it caps out every month on how many hours of content you can put up. And I was just looking at the other day of like changing my plan and just finding out what options are up there. And come to find out, I'm grandfathered into some older plan that they no longer offer. And so now the rates for hosting and putting all this stuff online, if I were to change something or restart now, tremendously have gone up. So this podcasting thing is big business apparently to go out and do all of this. But anyway, I'm going to stay where I'm at. I'm going to stay with the number of hours and stuff I'm allotted, and hopefully they don't change anything on me at where I'm at. So anyway, two more weeks left, this and next. And what have we learned so far? I think it's good to kind of go back to the previous weeks of that we've covered and just kind of recap a little bit. So the first week, kind of looking at chapters 1 and 2, specifically 2, but we had to go back to chapter 1 to set things up, was titled God's Got a Plan, Even in an Upside Down World. So we saw the ancient Persians, they're concerned about what's the superficial. It's a different standard than what God calls us to. And man really looks at the outside, and God is looking at the heart. So we learned about that through this process of Esther becoming queen. Then we moved into kind of a darker part of the story right off the bat as we talk about Haman and the problem of evil that we saw in chapter 3. And we just see that evil is real. I think we need to admit that in our world. Sometimes we like to kind of cover things up, or there's this sort of, man's inherently good sort of mentality that exists out there. And as Christians, we gotta demolish that lie, because there is no inherent goodness in the heart of man. It is always about himself. It is always towards his own end and his own goal. And so we see that to the extreme in Haman. And in chapter 3, evil is real, persecution is real. And even though those things can cause some confusion in our world, as Christians, we have to realize God's in control. Just simply that. And we don't have to fear the enemy. We don't have to fear all of these things in our world. And then last time, could we leave the palace? Kind of setting us up for the end here as we move towards it, getting really close to the climax of the story in Esther 4. Esther has to realize her position in the palace isn't going to save her. She might buy some time if she needs to, and even though her fellow Jews and what she's all come from, though they may face the sword, they may face certain death, but ultimately that's coming for her if she doesn't act as well. And so her sort of leaving the palace, leaving her position in order to be obedient to what God is calling her to do, that models and reflects and points us to Jesus, who stepped out of heaven, stepped away from the ultimate palace, the ultimate place of authority, and came down and became a lowly servant. And he walked the path to the cross, bringing God glory and honor. And we can do that as well. We can follow Jesus in this life, knowing that he's going to be with us. He's going to go with us as we step out in faith. And so it's kind of taking that further. This message, Into Faith I Go, is basically these continuing steps that Esther is taking. And she's going to take kind of the first big one through this text. She leaves us in chapter 4 with the words, "If I perish, I perish." She knows she has to be obedient. She knows that the king, based upon Persian law, she has, it's kind of a 50-50 here. Like he can allow me to come into his presence, or he can say, this person is unsummoned and I have not requested them, and therefore they can be executed. It's a very, thinking about in our world, like you can't approach a ruler, you can't just approach the president, a monarch, anyone. You have to have special permission to go before that person. And even as the queen here, we realize women back then, it wasn't this kind of necessarily this dual rule type of monarchy thing. Like she still has a lot of inequality, I guess you could say, as in her position of what she can do actually as queen. So she's calling the Jews to fast for 3 days. There's Jews living in this city of Susa, and she's got her own inner circle of women and aides, and they're going to do the same thing, fast and pray. And Mordecai is going to be kind of the guy getting the word out, spreading the word, getting people to intercede as she prepares to make this request of the king. She's stepping into faith. She's going to go into the unknown. She doesn't know what was going to come on the other end of this, but she's giving it over to the Lord. So we're going to start by reading some of that encounter in chapter 5, and we're picking it up on verse 1. On the third day, Esther dressed in her royal clothing and stood in the inner courtyard of the palace facing it. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the royal courtroom facing its entrance. As soon as the king saw Queen Esther standing in the courtyard, she gained favor with him. The king extended the gold scepter in his hand toward Esther, and she approached and touched the tip of the scepter. "What is it, Queen Esther?" the king asked her. "Whatever you want, even to half the kingdom, will be given to you." "If it pleases the king," Esther replied, "may the king and Haman come today to the banquet I have prepared for them." The king said, "Hurry and get Haman so we can do as Esther has requested." So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. While drinking the wine, the king asked Esther, "Whatever you ask will be given to you. Whatever you want, even to half the kingdom, will be done." Esther answered, "This is my petition and my request. If I have found favor in the eyes of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and perform my request, may the king and Haman come to the banquet I will prepare for them. Tomorrow I will do what the king has asked." Okay, well, as we look at this text and as we start diving in to some points that we draw from this, the first thing I have today is that faith steps are part of our journey in Christ. Way back to verse 1 there, on the third day, Esther dressed herself in royal clothing and stood in the inner courtyard of the palace facing it. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the royal courtroom facing its entrance. So Esther prepares herself. She's going forward with the information that she has, the prayers of her people covering her, and she's doing what she believes God is calling her to do. And thinking back to just when she starts out as queen, could she have imagined any of this when she was first elected? Probably not. Did she ask for or want any of this? Most certainly not. But here she is, and she has this big request, this big ask, this bold prayer going before her. God, please go before me. And how does the king respond here? Verse 2, as soon as the king saw Esther standing in the courtyard, she gained favor with him. He extends the gold scepter in his hand towards Esther, and she approaches and touched the tip of the scepter. And then he asks, what is it, Queen Esther? The king asked her, whatever you want, even to the half the kingdom will be given to you. And so I think we all kind of breathe a collective sigh of relief here. We kind of say, okay, God, thank you. She's made it this far. It's like she's made it through this part of the process. And the king is going to listen to her. And she has favor with the king. It says, gained favor with him in verse 2. So kind of the first step is accomplished here. She's gotten up the courage to do this much. But at this stage, and what we've read here so far, she hasn't asked for anything yet, has she? And really, by the end of chapter 5, she hasn't necessarily set out to do the thing that she was going to do yet. And even though Haman, this evil, wicked guy who's really central to all of this, is still around, she invites him and the king to a banquet with her. So we have to realize this is the first step. There's going to have to be more steps. But God is going to prepare her for the next one and the next one. And I reflected upon this, and I'm just like, man, anybody reading this and anybody who's journeyed to any degree in the Lord, in your faith, I think we could all share. There's evidence of God doing this at some point in our lives and our families, bringing us through. Bring us through these faith steps. And I guess just kind of a personal testimony of what I've seen the Lord do. And I know I've shared this in different aspects throughout the podcast and the blog. So a lot of people know a good deal of my story. But almost 10 years ago now, in 2017, our family, the Johnsons, moved from where we were living in South Dakota at the time to Tennessee, where we live now, Middle Tennessee. And as part of that, I was a worship pastor in a church in South Dakota, town called Aberdeen. I was on staff. My wife was on staff. She's doing children's ministry. I was doing worship. And ironically, we're doing very similar types of things even right now at the church we're here. But this church that was in South Dakota had steadily grown. God was blessing, giving favor on it. And despite all that, I think 2016 into 2017 was sort of this transition year, especially for us. And I felt like God was saying, that time of ministry, that season was drawing to a close in South Dakota for me. And I was wrestling with that some. And this could be a whole podcast, but I want to keep it short and pertinent to the point here. I went to school right out of high school to become a pharmacist. I went through pharmacy school. I went into the Navy, moved back to the Midwest after being in the Navy for 3 years as a pharmacist. And I started just working in just kind of retail / clinical setting of pharmacy, just in the kind of the private side of things. And during this time, just started really thinking about ministry. And direction back to Bible school and to kind of do a 180 with my life, with our family and everything, to go from being a pharmacist to going to ministry, going to learn about worship, being a pastor, all those sort of things. And so the first kind of job out of that was this position in South Dakota at this church. And over the course of 9 years there, just was like, okay, what's next, God? As I feel this is winding down, am I to go back into full-time pharmacy? Am I go to another church? Am I to do something else? What is it? I'd kind of gone from part-time ministry in full-time pharmacy to seeing that flip over the course of those 9 years, of really being full-time at this church and just part-time, just working pharmacy a little bit on the side. And I'd been down to Tennessee. I'd been to Nashville for a few things over the years, songwriter things, worship leading things. And God just kind of started putting that on my heart. Like I said, 2016, 2017, of really like considering this area and not even knowing exactly why. But that was the first kind of step of doing this pull. And so you kind of reverse engineer that a little bit and you tell yourself like, well, then what do we have to do in order to make the move from South Dakota to Tennessee? What are some of those faith steps along the way? Well, you tell your family, our immediate family, your kids. I remember distinctly having a conversation with them after a Sunday morning of church and leading worship, and my wife doing kids ministry, of having them all in our van and just saying, hey, we feel like God is calling us to move. And then from there, you tell your extended family, your parents, other people in your life. You tell your church home, because obviously that's a big thing that, hey, we're stepping down. Put your house up on the market, hoping it doesn't take a long time to sell. Start looking on things on the other end in Tennessee of places to live and jobs and things like that, figuring out job situations. In October then of 2017, we moved from where we were at in South Dakota to Tennessee, Spring Hill, Tennessee, and into a little 3-bedroom apartment where we just kind of started life here and just said, okay, God, we're here. But God sold the house. He brought us, I think, from the moment we told our church till the moment we moved was no more than 6 weeks. That summer, and things just moved very fast. Like, just if I had waited or gone too early, gone too late, like it was God just moving everything along at the right time, these faith steps. And he opened the door here, and I started working pharmacy down here again and volunteering at our church. And again, that's completely flip-flop, where I'm in ministry and really not in pharmacy anymore. And so this whole season has just been, when I think about Into Faith I Go and think about Esther, for me, that's like a real world example of it. And I was brought to this verse in Colossians 2, verses 6 and 7. So then, just as you have received Christ Jesus as Lord, continue to walk in him, being rooted and built up in him and established in the faith, just as you were taught, and overflowing with gratitude. Continue to be built up, rooted in Christ. Continue to walk in him, continue to grow in him, continue stepping out, even when it seems scary. And I'd love to hear from you guys if you have some of these similar things of like, here's what God did. Here's what God did in our home, our marriage, our family. These are some faith steps that we've taken. I'd love to hear that. info@DerekCharlesJohnson.com. I'll just drop that in there. That's my email. So we're going to have faith steps as we continue following Jesus. And the second thing I have is that these steps of faith are going to come with some opposition. Who hasn't gone away? What hasn't gone away? As we see Esther stepping into all this, Haman. Haman is still there. And the rest of this chapter, as it describes Haman, it's just him being him. It's just he's just this pompous, arrogant guy, prideful to the nines, and everything. But he's leaving this banquet, or he's going into this banquet just higher than a kite, because he thinks the queen invited me to a banquet. I'm being honored, all these things. But then he is walking on his way home, and in verse 9 it says, that day Haman left full of joy and in good spirits, but when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate, and Mordecai didn't rise or tremble in fear at his presence, Haman was filled with rage towards Mordecai. So he leaves the banquet, he's in good spirits, he's walking home, passes Mordecai, and he's like, oh yeah, man, I hate this guy. Because Mordecai, remember, he doesn't bow when he sees Haman. He's not giving him that reverence, that awe, those things that he demands, requires, really. And he goes home, Haman, and he brings his friends around and his wife, and it's just kind of this really moment of tell me how amazing I am. Remind me again what you guys think of me, and just give me some positive affirmation. I suppose he's kind of down now because of Mordecai. He's riding this roller coaster of emotions. But, let's talk about my wealth. Let's talk about my sons. We learn later in the book that he has 10 sons. Let's talk about how the king promoted me. Just dote on me. Tell me how amazing I am. And then we read verses 12 through 14, he says this, what's more, Haman added, Queen Esther invited no one but me to join the king at the banquet she had prepared. I'm invited again tomorrow to join her with the king. Still, none of this satisfies me, since I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate all the time. His wife, Zeresh, and all his friends told him, have them build a gallows 75 feet tall, ask the king in the morning to hang Mordecai on it, then go to the banquet with the king and enjoy yourself. The advice pleased Haman, so he had the gallows constructed. So we have Esther stepping out, and she's saying, into faith I go, but Haman is still there, and he's still plotting his evil, wicked plan against her, against the Jews. Haman doesn't know that she's a Jew, but Esther is part of this. And into all this, without knowing the end of the story, we might read this and say, okay, what are you doing here, God? What's going on? This still isn't getting any closer to a resolution. And man, it's sometimes in life we just feel that way, don't we? It's here I am, I'm stepping out, I'm serving the Lord, I'm being faithful, I'm being obedient, I'm doing the stuff I think I'm supposed to be doing. I'm prayed up, I'm going out. But man, the enemy and opposition is still just coming at me. Why is it that the more I press in, the harder I go after the Lord, it seems like it gets harder in life? And I think the reason why is because the enemy, the devil, he hates to see us grow in Christ. He hates us pressing in more, going after the things of God, seeing our families on fire for Jesus, being all in. He hates it. And he's going to do everything in his power to stop it. And if we're honest, many of us, when we face that opposition, we start kind of pressing into God and reading our Bible more, being in prayer, when we do have the kind of that pushback, we have this tendency, or at least we're tempted to just say, I'm just gonna throw in the towel at this point. I don't really, this is hard, it's not worth it. Doing all this stuff, reading the Bible, going to church, this is a hard road. I'm tired, and we can be tempted to kind of stall out in that spot, because the faith steps get harder and harder, it seems like sometimes. But into those steps, into that journey with the Lord is where we find the Lord, where we find his presence. And he's right there alongside of us. He's cheering us on. He's arming us with strength for the battle. Pulling in this verse from Psalm 9 and 10. The Lord is a refuge for the persecuted, a refuge in times of trouble. Those who know your name trust in you because you have not abandoned those who seek you, Lord. Every time you step out, understand you're going to face opposition. You might face persecution. You might face some situations where people know you're a Christian and that just makes them uncomfortable because they don't like that. But every faith step has to be taken. God's not going to abandon you. Jesus will never leave you. Reminded of the story of Daniel, of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're thrown into the fiery furnace, but who is in that furnace with them? It says in verse 24, I think this is Daniel 3. I just have the verse, but verse 24, then King Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in alarm. He said to his advisors, didn't we throw 3 men bound into the fire? Yes, of course, your majesty, they replied to the king. Verse 25, he exclaimed, look, I see 4 men, not tied, walking around in the fire unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. The king is saying, I see 4 men, and they're not tied, they're just walking around, the fire's not harming them. And there's one that looks like a son of the gods. He's describing Jesus. Jesus is in the fire with these guys. When we're walking through something tough, he's with us as well. God never abandons us as we step out in faith, even as we face opposition. Final point here in this, into faith I go, stepping out in faith. As you step out in faith, God is working behind the scenes. Going to do a quick flashback. This is to chapter 2, and I think I alluded to this. Didn't talk about it yet, but need to go to chapter 2, verses 21 through 23. During those days, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs who guarded the entrance, became infuriated and planned to assassinate King Ahasuerus. When Mordecai learned of the plot, he reported it to Queen Esther, and she told the king on Mordecai's behalf. When the report was investigated and verified, both men were hanged on the gallows. This event was recorded in the historical record in the king's presence. So what are the facts? Mordecai learns of a plot. It's to kill the king, to assassinate him. He reports this up to Esther. He still has that communication where he can go directly to the queen. There's then an investigation that has begun. The plot is uncovered. It's found out to be true. And those that were going to try and kill the king are executed. And the king's life is saved. And now, if you recall, I talked about before and through other studies of this book, just pointed out there are seemingly these random occurrences throughout the book of Esther where this thing and that thing happens, and then kind of goes back and forth between different people, but things that just kind of randomly occur where we're like, okay, that's interesting, but then over time, they sort of build on each other. We had the beginning of the book where the king throws a party, the queen refuses to come. This sets up everything for Esther to come on the stage, and she's selected as queen. Now we have another one of these random occurrences, and it's simply this. The king cannot sleep. He's got a night of sleepless, tossing and turning, and he's basically saying, bring me something really boring that I can listen to and kind of fall back asleep. At least that's how I interpret it. This is like my wife and I, sometimes we'll have the TV on at night and we'll just put on something just really droning, boring, like a narrator documentary kind of thing. Maybe it's World War II or something like that. And it just lulls you to sleep. And if I'm awake, like it's really interesting, and I would pay attention because that's kind of stuff I find fascinating. But I put it on at night when I'm already kind of tired, and I'm out. And so the king is asking for something to be brought to him, and they bring this historical record in, and they just kind of everything that happens throughout the day in Susa and Persia, these things were traded, and this person was promoted, and this thing happened, and whatever. These events are all recorded in a book, and I'm assuming they just have a whole catalog or library of these things, and so the servants are like, we'll bring you a book of the historical record and we'll just start reading it. But randomly, or seemingly not randomly, I don't know. I don't think it's random at all. They go to the page where this plot that Mordecai uncovered, they go to the historical record of that this was recorded. And so in Esther 6, 1-3, we pick this up. It says, that night sleep escaped the king, so he ordered the book recording daily events to be brought and read to the king. They found the written report of how Mordecai had informed on Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the entrance when they planned to assassinate the king. The king inquired, what honor and special recognition have been given to Mordecai for this act? The king's personal attendants replied, nothing has been done for him. So the king is saying here, man, this guy, this Mordecai, saved my life. What did we ever do to recognize him? Nothing, sir. And this is where I believe the whole story of Esther flips. If we read the rest of chapter 6, we see the king now call for Haman. Like, he's wide awake now. And he's read this story. This thing happened. We never recognized Mordecai. We got to make this right. We got to do something for him. He calls to Haman, and he says, Haman, I want to honor somebody. And what's Haman immediately thinking? Oh, this is about me again. And he says, what do we do for somebody? What would you do for someone that the king chooses to honor? So he puts it on Haman, like, what would you do if I wanted to honor somebody? Well, he says, you'd put royal robes on him. Even the robes that the king himself has worn, you put those on him, treat him like he's royalty. Then you put him on the king's horse. Then you put a royal crown on his head. And then you lead him through the streets so the people can see. And you lead him, he's on the horse, he's got the robes on, he's got the crown, and you say, this is what is to be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. So the king's listening to all this, taking it all in, and he says to Haman, all right, do that to Mordecai the Jew. And I think this is just where everything switches, because Haman is crestfallen. Haman goes from being on top of the world, having a plan. He's like, we're gonna take Mordecai and hang him in the morning. His wife's already said, this is what you got to do. And he's at the bottom now. And this is the great reversal that begins in Esther, in this story. Everything that was going to happen to God's people, everything that was going to come upon them, it's now going to come upon those who tried to destroy his people, on those who would devise this plot. It really proves that God does not mess around when you mess with his children. We have to take the faith steps. We have to stay obedient. And as we do, it's God who's then doing the work. He is working behind the scenes. He's putting pieces in motion. He's gathering resources. He's giving you favor before people you'll need to have favor with. And he's shutting the mouths of the opposition. What's quickly going to unravel now is Haman's plot, and all those initial steps of faith that Esther took, that we read about, those are going to be very quickly accelerated. And if you want to get ahead of me, you can read chapters 7 and 8. You kind of finish out the whole book if you want to see what happens. We have to remember this all goes back to Esther's willingness. Her saying, if I perish, I perish. I know what I have to do. She did have a moment of questioning. She did have a moment of doubt, didn't she? She thought for a moment, I can't do that. I might not live. And I think we all have that moment of second guessing when God is putting something before us. And just because I've been alive for almost 50 years doesn't mean those moments get any easier. Like, I still can second guess. I still can say, God, I don't know if I can do that. But I have seen his history, and he's proven himself. And I've seen him go before me. I've seen him go before my family. I've seen him provide. I've seen him work behind the scenes and put things together that I could never have done on my own power, my own strength. Things that supernaturally happened. I've seen him do it. There's a few verses I want to close with, just to kind of cement this in for us. Psalm 37:28. For the Lord loves justice and will not abandon his faithful ones. They are kept safe forever, but the children of the wicked will be destroyed. Then Hebrews 13:5-6. Keep your life free from the love of money. Be satisfied with what you have, for he himself has said, I will never leave you or abandon you. Therefore we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? And finally, thinking about that robe that gets put on Mordecai, and just kind of that image that the king's going to honor him, that the king's going to sort of give him a special recognition here. Thinking about that robe of righteousness that our King, King Jesus, puts upon us when we choose salvation, when we choose to follow him. This is from Isaiah 61, verse 10. I rejoice greatly in the Lord. I exult in my God, for he has clothed me with the garments of salvation and wrapped me in a robe of righteousness. This story, guys, is just, it gets better and better. And I love, we're going to finish up next time. I love how Esther continues to just go through and do what she has to do, and the Lord rewards her obedience. You know, he's faithful to her. He's faithful to the Jewish people. She does it with a willingness that says, God, would you use me? And that's where we have to come, I believe, each day as well. God, what these next 24 hours are yours. What do you want to do through me, through your servant? There's going to be faith steps day after day after day. He's going to call you to do some things, and it's going to stretch you. But don't let that keep you from moving forward. Don't let the opposition that you face stall you out and keep you from growing in him. Because as you start moving, he's already ahead of you. He's already working. He's already bringing things together. And he's got a beautiful plan. Will you trust him? Will you move with him? Guys, I'm excited to finish this up, and thank you for journeying with me. Closing out with our theme verse, as we always do, from Ephesians 5:15-17. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Looking forward to seeing you on the next one as we finish Esther out. Take care. God bless.
Hey guys, this is Derek Charles Johnson. You have been listening to the As Bold as Lions podcast. I am a blogger, a songwriter, an artist, and if you've been encouraged by this podcast, please go ahead and subscribe and share, and head over to DerekCharlesJohnson.com for more encouraging content. God bless.